Secretary of Treasury.
Secretary of Treasury.
Deals with money. Hi, and welcome back to Mr. Raymond's Civics Academy, where today we will continue our Civics S.O.L. exam series with a look at the First and 14th Amendments. These two incredibly important amendments to the Constitution are all about protecting our basic freedoms and providing equality and fair treatment under the law. So for your state exam, you need to be able to describe the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment: religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition, as well as the 14th Amendment's guarantee of due process and equal protection of the laws. And just a reminder, teachers, that this PowerPoint, lesson plans, worksheets, smartboard activities, and more are available at Teachers Pay Teachers. Just click the link in the notes below or go to Teachers Pay Teachers and search for Mr. Raymond's Civics Academy. So the text of the First Amendment, which lists 5 basic freedoms, is pretty straightforward, so read along with me. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise of, or of the press, or of the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. And these freedoms provide the bedrock to a fair and open society, and we're going to look at them in greater detail. But one thing to remember as we go through these rights is that they are not absolute. The government can put some limits on them, and you have to remember this for your test. The First Amendment is probably the most well-known amendment. These rights are pretty easy for students to grasp, so you really just need to remember them and to recognize examples of them in test questions. Freedom of religion is a right that we discussed when we looked at the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom written by Thomas Jefferson. The importance of religious freedom dates back to the first settlers of the colonies, more than 150 years before the Bill of Rights was written. And as tensions between the Christian and Muslim worlds have exploded in recent years, this continues to be an important issue. There are 2 main ideas to religious freedom, and the first is known as the Establishment Clause, which states that the government cannot establish or endorse an official religion. At the time of this amendment, governments, mostly European monarchies ruled by kings and queens, had close ties between the government and the church, as we see here with Henry VIII of the UK meeting with the Pope of the Catholic Church before he broke with Catholicism and established a new official Church of England. Even in the United States, Massachusetts had an official religion in which only parish Protestant churches had full legal rights. However, the First Amendment helped establish the official break between the government and religion, known as separation of church and state, so that governments could not favor one church over another, and that all religions could practice without government favoritism. We discussed how Thomas Jefferson referred to the need for a, quote, wall of separation between church and state in order to have a free society. The fact that the federal government cannot endorse an official church does not mean that there aren't references to religion by our government. Religion plays an important role in politics and in our society, as expressed on our money with, quote, "In God we trust," and during the Pledge of Allegiance with, quote, "One nation under God." But this is very different to the traditional role that the church played in government, and continues in some countries, such as Iran, with their religious leader, the Ayatollah, calling most of the shots for his country's government. Here he is meeting with President Putin of Russia. The other part of religious freedom is that the government cannot interfere with the free exercise of religious practice. This free exercise clause has made news recently, as some businesses which disapprove of certain lifestyles have refused to incorporate laws or provide service to individuals based on claims of their religious rights. But what the clause is really aimed at is the government interfering with the way that people want to practice their religion. Next up is freedom of speech, probably the most discussed constitutional right. Freedom of speech means that individuals are free to express their opinions and beliefs, whether those opinions are popular or not. This allows Americans to speak out when they think they're being treated unfairly by the government or society. In the 1960s, during the Vietnam War, 2 students were suspended for wearing armbands to protest the war, and they took their case, known as Tinker versus the Des Moines School District, to the U.S. Supreme Court. The court ruled that freedom of speech was more than just words, and included the right to express yourself through art, music, and even clothing, expanding freedom of speech to a freedom of expression. Now, as we said, not all rights are absolute. For example, there are limits on freedom of speech. You can't print or say lies about someone that hurts their reputation and causes harm. These are known as slander and libel. And you can't use words that cause fear in someone else by threatening them or yelling bomb on a crowded plane. However, for the most part, freedom of speech allows Americans to freely express their opinions without fear of government reprisals. Next up is freedom of the press, and this protects our news reporters' rights to gather and publish information, including that which criticizes the government. The press, or media, is sometimes referred to as the fourth branch of government. They keep an eye on the government to make sure that they aren't doing anything wrong, and they inform the people about the issues that will affect who they are going to vote for. The government also uses the press to get their message across and to let them know what the people are thinking. The press is what ensures that the government doesn't abuse their power or that our rights are not violated. And while America enjoys a strong protection of the right to criticize the government, this right is not available to a large portion of the world. This map shows access to a free press around the world, with countries in black and red having the worst record of governmental control of what is reported in their countries. By controlling the press and the media, these governments hope to control the way the people feel about their government. And in extreme cases, information is blocked about what is going on throughout much of the world. As you can see, many countries don't have access to a free press. Our next freedom is freedom of assembly, and this is the right of individuals to peaceably gather in groups. This is another tradition that played a crucial role in declaring independence from the British and expressing political opinions to those in charge. Protest in the form of assemblies have played a huge role in sending a strong message to our government about the need for change. Assembled groups had a huge impact during the civil rights era of the 1960s, resulting in the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, as well as protesting the Vietnam War and changing the way the federal government dealt with the Cold War. The right to assemble continues to play an extremely important way for the people to voice their opinions in a way that government officials can't ignore. Our next freedom is the right to petition, and this is another way that individuals and groups can reach out to the government to express their desire for change. Again, we see the power of numbers to demonstrate to our leaders that theirs is an opinion that must be addressed. Signing petitions has become increasingly easy as online petitions can spread a message to large groups of similarly concerned citizens in a short period of time. To petition is the right to address grievances to the government. And hopefully you remember the word grievance from our look at the Declaration of Independence. A grievance is a formal complaint. Petitioning the government or expressing your displeasure is another right that many people around the world don't enjoy. And they can find themselves in deep trouble with their governments by expressing grievances. So those are what are sometimes referred to as the Fab Five of freedoms in the First Amendment. And your test might give you a list of these freedoms as an answer, so you better memorize this list. First Amendment, freedom of religion, speech, press, assembly, and petition. And you better be able to recognize these rights in test questions. So the Bill of Rights, including the First Amendment, were originally only protections from the federal or the U.S. national government. So what happens if state governments take away these rights? And this leads to our next amendment that we need to know, the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment is one of my favorites, and it continues to play a big role in protecting our rights. So read along with me and try to recognize what is stated in the 14th Amendment, which says that, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, Nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. So there are at least 3 important protections listed in the 14th Amendment. The first part, you hopefully remember, defines citizenship as those who are either born or naturalized in the U.S. We looked at this in our video on citizenship, so for today's lesson, we're going to focus on the other sections, which establish that state laws must be constitutional, and that state governments must protect due process rights and provide equal protection. The 14th Amendment resolved the issue of extending the protections of the Bill of Rights to protections not just from the national or federal government, but to protections also from state governments. The 14th Amendment also extended due process protections to the states as well. Due process are the rules and procedures that the government must follow for those who are accused of a crime. Due process was originally guaranteed by the Fifth Amendment and includes things like the right to a lawyer, a jury, the right to defend yourself, and the right to remain silent. The 14th Amendment states that no government can make and enforce a law that, quote, deprives any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. In other words, if the government is going to take away your liberty or property by, say, putting you in jail, they must first give you due process rights to have a lawyer, a speedy public trial with a jury, rights that were established by the Sixth Amendment, and they can't force you to testify against yourself or charge you with the same crime twice as established by the Fifth Amendment. The right to due process, again, means that the government must operate within the law and provide fair procedures. And this is so important that it is the only right that has been added twice to the U.S. Constitution. Again, we find due process of law as a protection in the Fifth Amendment, requiring the national government to protect these rights, and the 14th Amendment requiring state governments to provide due process. We can see an example of this in the Supreme Court case of Gideon versus Wainwright. Gideon was a man found guilty by a Florida court, despite the fact that he couldn't afford a lawyer to defend himself. At the time, the Sixth Amendment right was only guaranteed by national courts. But after this case, every state had to provide a lawyer if someone could not afford one, thanks to the 14th Amendment. Another very important aspect of the 14th Amendment is that no state shall make laws that deny, quote, equal protection of the laws. In other words, the 14th Amendment was to protect from any unfair state or national law that didn't treat people as equals. The 14th Amendment was passed right at the end of the Civil War and the demise of slavery. And this section was especially focused on southern states who passed laws known as the Black Codes, which were meant to deny the newly freed slaves rights that other citizens enjoyed. These words of the 14th Amendment, equal protection of the laws, were used to bring an end to legal segregation and continue to be used by anyone who feels that the government is treating them differently under the law from other people. This powerful amendment is designed to make sure that all people are treated equally and the same, whether by the national government or state governments. And that concludes our look at these 2 important amendments. So let's review. What are the 5 freedoms of the First Amendment? Again, this is pretty basic and you have to know it. Freedom of religion, freedom of speech, freedom of petition, freedom of assembly, and freedom of the press. Which freedom allows the people to complain to the government? This could be more than one, but what we're looking for there is the freedom of petition. Which freedom would allow people to gather in a group to protest? That is, assembly. The 14th Amendment extended protections from the U.S. government to protection from state governments. The rules and procedures the government must follow are known as due process. What 2 guarantees can be found in the First Amendment freedom of religion? Remember that the government cannot establish or favor one religion over another or interfere with the practice of religion. What freedom allows a news reporter to criticize the government? Freedom of the press. What clause of the 14th Amendment states that everyone should be treated equally? Remember, equal is right in the name. Equal protection of the law. Okay, here's your state exam question. Which drawing shows freedom guaranteed by the First Amendment? In the first one, you have the right to remain silent. B, the right to a lawyer. C, you can help save the forest animals with a petition. Or D, I know who I am voting for. Well, there's only one there. It's C, the right to petition. And that's it. I want to thank you guys for watching. Be sure to subscribe. Up next, we're going to be looking at politics. And just a reminder, teachers, that this PowerPoint with lesson plans, worksheets, smartboard activities, and all kinds of additional resources are available at Teachers Pay Teachers. Just click the link in the notes section below or search for Mr. Raymond's Civics Academy at Teachers Pay Teachers. Again, guys, thanks for watching. Keep it up and you're going to ace that exam.